So one thing I can't really wrap my mind around is why everyone who's in Trump's orbit just has to rely on absolute lies. I mean, look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that what we're being fed every day in and out of the White House and what Trump says and any of the officials say, we're just be given we're given a story. We're not given the truth. We're given like Trump saying that we got 15 or I don't know the exact number, like 3 or 5 trillion dollars of deals coming from Qatar. Okay, the Qatarian GDP, their entire domestic product is I think under $300 billion. So we know we didn't make deals worth $5 trillion. Okay, that didn't happen. And if even if it did, the deals that were made, Boeing gets a slice, and then like the Trump's family gets the other slice. Like, what are the other deals being made there? But that's not what I want to dive into right now. Something I want to dive into right now is what I said in the opening: is why can't they tell the truth? Why do they constantly have to rely on a false narrative, a bunch of lies? Because it's like Trump lives in this fantasy world, and I kind of commented on that before. And ultimately, what I believe it is it's just Trump. He has been told yes his entire life that I don't think he can. I think he believes he's incapable of being wrong. And if he hears contradictory information, he'll literally look at you and go, "You're wrong. You're fired. Go away." Kind of like that. Remember that interview with him and he was talking to the reporter and the interviewer, and the interviewer says, "No, Mr. Trump, that those tattoos on the knuckles did not have MS-13 on them." And Trump literally looked at the guy and goes, "Oh, this is why the media is like no one likes the media, and the media is so crooked and corrupt because if you look at the picture, it has MS-13 right on his knuckles." And you, as a thinking person, are watching this interview go, what is going on with this man? What's like, who told him that was actual tattoos? And what it was, and what I believe it actually is Trump saw this image of the knuckles and the MS-13 on those knuckles, and he probably went over somebody, is this real? And they probably said, oh yeah, absolutely. And then he just, of course it's real then. In his world, he got this confirmation. It's real. And I believe that's the kind of world that Trump lives in. And because of this, we're seeing everybody in the orbit complying, for lack of a better way of putting it. They're not well, let's just watch this, for example. Kelly Loeffler, on top of Doge cuts, the One Big Beautiful Bill will generate 1.6 trillion in savings, creating 1 million Main Street jobs, and drive 750 billion in economic activity. Okay, a lot of this is kind of let's call it filler garbage. Okay, for example, $750 billion in economic activity. That's anything. That can literally be anything. That doesn't mean good or bad. That could be $750 billion of losses because that's an economic activity. It could be $750 billion in just normal trade, economic activity. See, it means nothing. But the 1.6 trillion in savings and create another 1 million Main Street jobs. That is a claim that we can go ahead and look at. But let's go ahead and let's hear from her.
And that's certainly something that's just part of what Doge is helping with. It's not just fraud, it's waste and abuse. And we found billions at this agency, which by
Sure, they did find billions. They actually found a few billion, not a lot, not the 2 trillion that they were hoping for, but they found a few $1 billion that they clawed back, but without any kind of congressional approval. See, in America, we have this process where Congress authorizes money for certain things, line items, right? And this money, this authorization for this money must be spent on these line items. That's how the power of the purse works. Congress has the power of the purse, not the president. But now we have this special Department of Government Efficiency that's just allowed to magically stop payments going to where they were already congressionally authorized, which, well, is against everything. I mean, they'll argue the president has ultimate executive authority over everything because they want a king, but we don't live in a monarchy. We don't live in a kingdom. We live in a country with rule of law. Rule of law says, therefore law rules. And the law is Congress appropriated this money to be spent on these things. And so what Doge has done is said, screw that. This doesn't, USAD gone. Who cares that it's congressionally appropriated for and created by Congress, and the executive branch has no authority to dissolve it or whatever. We're just going to do it anyway, and we're going to do it anyway with this program. We're going to do it anyway with this program, and we're going to pluck, because who's going to stop us, essentially? And that's really that's the one weird trick that they were able to deploy in this whole. This is why I don't. I mean, I'm now bouncing around, but when you think about it, Trump's methodology of governing is to just steamroll things. Not get anything passed, not get anything through Congress or the proper channels where there actually might be some permanency to the policies, but instead just steamroll it. I have created Doge, and Doge will take a hammer to everything. Well, long story short, yeah, it took a hammer to a lot of different things, but it's not permanent. Next president gets in, guess what? Everything's undone. Now, to a point that could already be said, but for example, like Trump's first term, there's a lot of different tariffs and different other things that were put in place, and guess what? Biden left them alone. There's a calculus of, is there the political will to change what the previous administration did and whatever, and that's a calculus that every president will make. But Trump's methodology of just taking a wrecking ball to everything and just doing it so long as he's not stopped is not only not permanent, so anything that's done just doesn't get to stick around, doesn't get to remain in effect, but it's like challenged. It's just a poor way of governing. Okay, but continuing with the video, I forgot where we were.
By the way, will be made permanent. We are getting rid of $3 billion in wasteful contracts. And what I
wasteful contracts. There's the keyword. There's the buzzword right there. They're getting rid of the $3 billion of wasteful contracts. Who's determined that they were wasteful? Were they congressionally appropriated? Did Congress look at that contract and go, here's the money for it? Because that's how it works. You don't want the money to go for that. You got this big, beautiful bill. Go ahead and claw back those funds through law, rule of law, not rule of we think it's wasteful, so therefore no. And then they'll come at you with like stories like, yeah, we defunded Iranian drag queen story hour. And so to the normal troglodyte, they'll go, oh, drag queen story hour, we shouldn't give any money for that, so that's good that they took that money back. Except that they're bypassing our congressional order. They're bypassing the order, everything how this works. If you want it to be clawed back, that's fine. Claw it back through law. Because what you end up happening is people now... Why do we have laws? Why do we have the Congress? Why do we have the Senate or the House of Representatives or any of these bodies when the president can just do whatever the hell he wants? See, it doesn't work that way, and it's extremely dangerous that it works that way. There's videos of people out there going, hey, we just need a dictator for 10 years just to restart the country. That is the most dangerous thing that could be done. Like right now, like everyone's still in their honeymoon period where Trump's just kind of doing whatever he wants. And those who voted for Trump is like, oh my God, super based. He's just doing and taking care of everything. America is so great, but it's not. They're talking about suspending habeas corpus. You want to talk like the don't tread on me people are literally like, tread on me, daddy. Imagine that. Imagine no habeas corpus. Imagine literally being scooped up off the street, gone. No due process, no court procedure, and it's happening. It's happening with, the what they claim to be illegal aliens and the illegal migrants and every that thing. But we have stories of children, citizens being deported with their parents. Some with cancer, some with. It's just anyway. Rule of law is the.
I'm excited about is we can do
here.
that. We can make the Doge cuts permanent, and we can have the big, beautiful bill, which is really brilliant in terms of what it does because it cuts $1.6 trillion.
Bullshit. It cuts. Yeah. Hold on. Let me let me circle around real quick. Does it cut some money? Oh, you betcha. Oh, it cuts a lot of money. And where's that money coming from? Benefits. It's the only place in the entire budget where you can actually get that much money to cut, and it's coming from benefits. And here's the thing. Though that money is cut from you, it's cut from me, it's cut from people. I'm not a billionaire. I'm not a multimillionaire. And right now I don't rely on any benefits. Thank God, I'm a working human being. I make my own money. I pay my own bills. But there are people out there who don't have the means to do this. Will there always be an element of fraud and abuse in these systems? You bet there's an element of that. But to the tune of 30% of these budgets? No. Where we have to remove $800 billion from Medicaid? There's that much fraud and abuse? No, there isn't. No, there isn't. The only reason that we're cutting $1.6 trillion is because there's no universe A. There's no universe A where we can have these benefits and also pay for tax cuts that they want to extend. It's basically extending the original Trump tax cuts. There's no universe that we could pay for that. But not on top of not being able to pay for it, because not only are we cutting $1.6 trillion, so that drops the bar a little bit over, but the tax cuts increase that deficit bar. So instead of it being here, it's here, because we're adding $4 trillion to the deficit, or even more. Some estimates are even higher. And then they're going to tell you, well, hey, we're also going to be increasing so much economic activity. Yeah, that $750 billion economic activity number. The economic activity, the growth is just going to skyrocket. It's going to skyrocket because tariffs are going to make us so much money, which is another thing too. The consumers pay the tariff. I mean, there's some portion of it that can be eaten on both the supply side and the production side, but at the end of the day, or the retail side, but at the end of the day, what's happening is there's an increase in the base price cost of the unit. This is not going to be universal across the board, but it's going to be like, think about a car coming from Germany. Trump's, I believe, said 25% tariff. So if you want to buy that German car, well, the manufacturer is going to absorb what they can, but that car is coming to you 10 to 15%, if not more expensive. Now, this does help. This might help some domestic manufacturers, but at the end of the day, you got to think about that too, because every domestic car manufacturer too, they get their parts from abroad, and then sometimes those parts are going to be like, it'll be a part will go from China to Indonesia, and from Indonesia it could go to America, and from America is built out, but then it has to be sent to like Canada or Mexico for final finishing or something, and then sent back for final assembly. So how many times does it cross that border? Does a tariff get applied? It's a lot bigger calculus than just, tariffs are going to make everything great. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Tariffs only do one thing for the American consumer. Tariffs only make things more expensive for the consumer. Now, for businesses, tariffs have their place. Tariffs can help protect a domestic industry. Tariffs can help domestic competition. It's a tool that can be wielded. But like any tool, like I'm not going to, if I have screws to screw into the wall, I'm not going to use a hammer. Okay, tools have purposes, and what they're doing right now is they're taking their massive tariff hammer and they're trying to use it for every application possible, and it's not going to work. It's definitely not a long-term strategy, and we're going to get to something here in a moment, because I mean, the proof is all around us that they know that this isn't a long-term strategy.
Dollars in wasteful spending, in mandatory spending, and then we will also have the DOGE cuts on top of it. And we know that President Trump supports both, getting rid of the mandatory spending as well as the DOGE cuts, which are
get rid of the mandatory spending. Do you know what mandatory spending they're actually talking about? What they mean by mandatory spending? Mandatory spending is things that the government has to pay for. For example, the government does not have to pay for a monument. Okay, a monument isn't something that the government has to pay for, but the government had a mandatory line item would be like Social Security. It's written in law. It's a massive program. The government must that program must be available, and whatever governmental funding needs to be spent into that, it has to happen. Period. So a lot of our taxes go up. Congress, mandatory that these tax dollars must go into Social Security, X, Y, Z, mandatory spending. So what their brilliant idea is, let's just go ahead and cut mandatory spending. Who does that hurt? Who does that affect?
are so important. And that's
okay. So that's that video. And I mean, there's a lot that we could discuss on that. But the idea here is, one, it's the thought that, cutting $1.6 trillion in, mandatory spending, and then I'm going to be really, really generous and say that there was $200 billion saved by Doge. it's one short-lived. Well, one is short-lived. The Doge items are short-lived because those were just acts of government overreach, if you ask me. They weren't permanent. They weren't approved by Congress. They weren't no bills, no law, just a guy with a hammer or a knife slashing things. Okay, not permanent and ultimately kind of reckless. Then there's the big beautiful bill, the congressional cuts and stuff. Those could be more permanent, but if you ask me, massively more damaging, because at the end of the day, what's happening is these cuts are being taken directly from benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, all these things. I mean, I'm not going to disparage the will or the thought behind, hey, we need work requirements or different things to make those receiving Medicaid either more fair for the taxpayer. That's okay, that's fine. But the implication that 25 to 30% of the entire Medicare budget needs to be eliminated because that's how much fraud there is horseshit of the highest degree. What it is, it's an attempt. One, it's an attempt to just be cruel. Let's just say, I think ultimately there might be 1% of fraud or something. Actually, maybe even less than that. 1%. They're going after, I think, over the next 5 years, 25 to 30% or something like that of the entire Medicaid budget. And the implication here is there's that much waste, fraud, and abuse. No, it's a poor attempt to reel in their deficit spending, because directly underneath this video, we have a gentleman, Jeff, here asking Grok. Now, everything AI needs to be taken with a grain of salt, but at the end of the day, here's what we're finding. And this is repeated economic experts around everywhere. It's essentially everybody. Everyone understands, even the Republicans in the House that voted for this, and more so, if you ask me, the Republicans in the Senate who see this train barreling down the tracks, they know that this bill is going to add 1.6 trillion, or hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Jeff here asks Grok, are these claims founded? And Grok replies, Lawfulest claims that the OBBB generating 1.6 trillion in savings and 1 million jobs and $750 billion in economic activity lack full support from nonpartisan analysis. For example, the CRFB estimates 2.5 to 5.1 trillion dollars will be added to the deficit. I mean, just think about that alone. The deficit spending that we are okay. The big beautiful bill raises the debt ceiling by $4 or $5 trillion. Why do you need to raise the debt ceiling if we're reducing spending? You raise the debt ceiling so you can spend more. Okay, that's elementary. That's kindergarten stuff right there. And as we have the Grok analysis here from CRFB, estimates 2.5 to $5 trillion added to the deficit, not savings, because they're going to spend more. They're going to do what they can to eliminate benefits for the people as much as they can so they can claw back some of that money, basically just to transfer that money from benefits for the poor people so that the richest of this can go ahead and pay less money in taxes. By the way, who's asking for that? What billionaire have you met oh yeah, I need to pay less in taxes? I get it. Nobody likes paying taxes, but is there this coalition of just billionaires all over the place going, man, we pay 37%, and that's just way too much. And it's a progressive tax system, so you're not paying 30% taxes on your entire. And that's on their income. That's not even on their net worth and everything else. And if you ask me, billionaires and multimillionaires have more mechanisms to not pay taxes than the common man. I mean, if you look at the bar charts, and I wish I had one in front of me, the amount of taxes paid, yes, the richest among us pay the most amount of tax. But when you look at the actual slice as a percentage of their income, you're looking at the poorest of us spending a lot larger chunk of our income to pay those taxes, whereas the richest of us, it's a microscopic amount compared to their worths and their let's call it that, their economic power. Middle class, our economic power is in our collective economic power, not our individual economic power. Billionaires, yeah, the true same for both. Their collective economic power for the billionaires is massive, but their individual economic power is massive. The point here being, I don't know what the correct answer is, but the correct answer isn't literally to steal. It's let's steal from the Medicaid, the poorest, the most. Let's steal from the most vulnerable of us to give to the least vulnerable of us. Who needs these tax cuts? If you Biden left the presidency with the highest stock markets and the highest personal wealth of any president, or the people's personal wealth. I'm talking like the public. People had more money. The market was the highest. Whatever. Sure, there was an inflationary thing, and if you look at the actual numbers, we're going to see that America came out, I think, out of any developed nation, better off with a lower inflation rate and lower cost of living. It wasn't the greatest thing on the planet, but it wasn't like what it could have been. We could have been a whole lot worse. We weren't wanting. People weren't, by and large, struggling day to day. Things are tough, but things are tough now. Anyway, long story short, markets are high. What was it? 45,000 points. And I think today, and we're what, 200 something days, 100 whatever days into Trump's presidency, and 100 something, 130, I don't know. And like the market is 41,000. It's still down 10%. But, we're going to be raking in so much money by making things more costly for people with tariffs. And that's another thing too. Let's think about that real quick. Okay? Let's zone in for a moment. We're going to be so rich, and because tariffs are going to bring in so much money. Well, the money that tariffs are bringing in isn't from UK. It's from Americans, by and large. Like I said, the suppliers and whatever, they might be able to absorb some of that just to retain whatever competitive edge that they possibly can. For example, if I'm shipping a product to America and my tariff before was 3%, so on my $100 item, for example, the buyer had to pay $3 on my because it was a $100 item. Now it's 10%. Now it literally increased $7 extra so for that buyer to purchase my thing. I might lower my price by a couple of bucks to help absorb that tariff. But depending on what I'm making and how much margin I even have to play with, I'm not going to lower it substantially and not across the board. So there's still going to be that extra cost. And in some cases, that cost can be absorbed, but that's not every case. And when you have across the board tariffs, no matter what, you get price increases. But if you ask me, really, what the whole tariff idea is, who was it? Matt Gaetz had an idea that we would get rid of all taxes and we would just have a flat sales tax, a national flat sales tax of like 30%, and that would pay for everything. Not only is that massively regressive, but at the end of the day, it creates a million problems. But the idea is, why tax for property? Why tax for income? Why tax all this stuff? We'll just have, every time you buy anything, flat 30% goes right to Uncle Sam. Well, after that idea was pitched, it was by and large rejected because it has a lot of problems with it. It has a lot of flaws. Not only does it instantly make everything 30% more expensive in a time period where everyone is complaining about prices. Everything is too expensive. Inflation is too high. And what do you want to do? You want to make everything 30% more expensive? So, I mean, it was a hard pill to swallow, and it was a hard idea to get out there. But if you ask me, that idea was then evolved. Instead of taxing everything 30%, how about we just tariff every import X%? And that tariff, because people don't understand, I mean, why was Trump fighting so hard for the longest time and going that the other guys paved the tariffs? Because he was really betting and hoping that people were really dumb enough to believe it, and two, didn't understand what tariffs were in the first place. The word tariff was an easier pill to swallow than tax. And I believe that's where this came from. If you ask me, that's exactly where this came from. Is instead of taxing everything 30% to, raise the money the government needs to do whatever it needs to do, we'll start tariffing. And, there's a whole lot of other economic mumbo jumbo that can go into that. But at the end of the day, I believe that was the exact idea when why Trump is doing this whole tariff thing anyway. But you know, we know for a fact that it's not working out the way he thought it would, because at the end of the day, it's too blunt of an instrument. And then we have like kind of bouncing back and forth here. We have, Elon saying that, basically going, he's disappointed by the bill because, well, let's have Elon.
So, I was like disappointed to see the massive spending bill, frankly, which increases the budget deficit, not just decrease it, and undermines the work that the Doge team is doing.
I actually thought that when this big, beautiful bill came along. I mean, like, everything he's done on Doge gets wiped out in the first year.
I think a bill can be big or it can be beautiful, but I don't know if it.
I mean, that's Elon running cover for his buddy anyway. Think about that. Everything Doge might have accomplished is immediately destroyed with the BBB, the big beautiful bill, because there's no plan. There is a plan, but the plan was never Doge to do anything. Doge was a publicity stunt. Doge was a hammer that Trump used to get some things done that he wanted done. And let's be honest, Elon wanted done as well. Elon's perfectly positioned now to be the government's vending machine, if you ask me. And that's anyway. But yeah, let's talk about policy though. It doesn't make sense because everything that Doge did, and this is where they're tripping over themselves trying to explain what's going on, because at the end of the day, what's going on is no cohesive plan. Doge was supposed to make all the cuts and make government efficient, and it sounds really good on paper. And it sounds really good when the narrative, especially your narrative, the Trump president's narrative, has been the government spends too much. We have to, fiscal responsibility. We have to make sure that we can pay our bills. We can't leave our grandchildren with $40 trillion of national debt. So yeah, that narrative really resonates with a lot of people. But then, boom, you have a BBB, Big Beautiful Bill, that immediately wipes it all out. It also goes against exactly everything that you've preached for the last however long your campaign was. 2 years or whatever it was. Everything's going to be more affordable. Everything is going to be more efficient. Government spending is going to go down. We're going to reduce the deficit. Except that our very first fiscal bill, we want to raise the deficit. We want to slash Medicaid. And we want to give the richest of us a tax break. Yeah.
Provision was unknown to me when I voted for the bill.
Can you please tell us why you voted to approve a budget bill that includes Section 70302, which effectively prohibits federal courts from enforcing contempt orders, which would then allow current and future administrations to ignore those contempt orders by removing the enforcement capability?
Think about that. Can you explain the provision in this big, beautiful bill that literally makes it so that the courts cannot enforce their rulings? Or, in short, the president can continue doing exactly anything he ever wants. Not only is he criminally immune to crime, but now we're just going to make the entire government subservient to the executive branch. No more checks, no more balances. Let's go get rid of those. What you got? Hit us with it.
I do not agree with that section that was added to that bill.
I don't agree to that section of that bill. The mean Republicans put that one in. I only voted for the good stuff of the bill, but bad stuff. What am I supposed to do about that? Hey, do.
I will tell you this. I believe in the rule of law. I've taken an oath as an attorney. I've taken an oath as a state senator. I've taken an oath as a member of Congress, and I support our court system, and
I've taken an oath. I support our court system. I support our Constitution. I support our country. I just happen to vote for a bill that kind of undoes all of that. Oopsies. Gosh.
I do believe that the federal district courts, when issuing an injunction, should have legal effect. In fact, I relied upon that when the Biden administration was in place.
I mean, amen right there. That's really the ticket. Republicans had zero issue with national injunctions every time Biden wanted to do anything. Especially, remember student loan forgiveness? Student loan forgiveness, by and large, would be a massive economic boon. And that's something that can absolutely be debated. But hear what he just said. He just said, I supported the courts being able to stop Biden every time we wanted to stop. But now I voted for a bill that made that illegal because we're awesome, you know.
Federal courts did a tremendous amount of good work. This provision was unknown to me when I voted for the bill.
Okay, next question.
This
It's really funny. It's literally, hey, Biden's so bad for these things that he's actually not doing, but we're going to say he's doing. But when we do it, it's cool. You know, government overreach. This kind of looks like government overreach. This kind of looks like big government. This kind of looks like tyranny. This kind of looks like everything that every Republican's ever been afraid of ever. And it's them that's doing it. And Trump's not even a Republican. I mean, for the longest time, he's a Democrat. And no, Democrats would... Anyway, moving on. So this one tickled me. We were talking a lot about trade and the tariffs and everything else. And this is why I primarily say that there's no plan. There is no plan. There's only feels. There's only vibes, man. And we're trying to make things work. And every week we have to change our story because every time we say something, it's directly contradicted by either us or something that us being like the Republican Party or whatever, or something that Trump says. Anyway, let's go ahead and listen. It works better with volume. Try that again. Am I okay? I don't feel hot. Volume.
Trade. They're saying Trump, Mr. President.
Okay, you saw that right too. I hit volume.
Taco trade. They're saying President Wall Street analyst, Mr.
Is there a evil spirit hitting the volume control on this? Like, does Trump have a guy in my room right now? Like, he won't. There's like a gremlin in the machine. They won't let me watch. The volume's up. I hit play. The volume goes off. Did you see that? Okay, we're gonna try again. Okay, so I'm just
Mr.
gonna do
President,
this.
Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And
Yeah, exactly like that. Oh,
and I said you have to open up your whole country, and because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did, they said, we'll meet anytime you want. And we have an end date of July 9th. You call that chickening out?
Yeah, because ultimately imposing tariffs on their exports, sure, might make their exports less competitive. And the idea of maybe those things would migrate themselves to America is something a toddler might think of. But at the end of the day, what's end up going to happen is, hey, you're going to lower the tariffs against us that you just opposed unilaterally because it hurts America. It doesn't necessarily hurt us. Okay, think about it this way. Let's take one of Trump's primary reasonings for imposing tariffs: trade deficits. Okay, let me describe what a trade deficit is. I go to my grocery store and I buy a bag of potato chips, a soda pop, and I don't know what else. What might I buy? A grapefruit. Love grapefruit. I now have a trade deficit with my grocery store of $15 or whatever it might be. No idea. It was a big bag of chips and a really big soda pop and a really big grapefruit. Okay, $15. So now that I have a trade deficit with my grocery store, according to Trump, the smart thing to do would be to impose a tariff on my grocery store of 50%. So the next time I go to buy my grapefruit, my soda pop, and my bag of chips, it's now 50% more expensive. I am winning at life. Said no one ever. Because trade deficits aren't a bad thing, inherently. All a trade deficit means is we are buying more from a country than they are buying from us. Now think about that real quick. America has 300 million people. 300 million, more than 300 million, but 300 million people. Let's call it 300 million consumers, okay? America has 300 million consumers. I haven't looked it up. In fact, we can right now. How many consumers in the UK? I was hoping I'd just get like a number. How about population UK? There we go. That's exactly what I wanted to see. The UK has, let's just call it 70 million people, okay? Population USA. 340 million. If the UK has 70 million and we have 340 million, that tells me we have more buyers buying than we have selling to a country like the UK. So if we had a trade deficit with the UK, that kind of would make some sense as we have more people who want to buy. So again, let's use that analogy of me walking into my grocery store, okay? I'm going to buy my products. The grocery store didn't buy anything from me, so I obviously should make my stuff more expensive. Winning. And then the thought process here is, at some point, me, America, the buyer, is going to go, you know what? I don't like spending 50% more for stuff, so I'm just going to plant a garden and raise cattle in my yard and build a Oreo factory and build a potato chip plant so that my deficit goes away and I just make everything myself. It's the most annoying argument because we don't want I as the buyer don't necessarily need all these things. Because especially if I could build a higher value added thing, let's say I'm a business now. I'm not a consumer. I'm a business, okay? And I buy materials from this country. These materials that I'm going to buy, I'm going to assemble and make into something that has a higher value that I'm going to sell for more. Now, if these, like for example, let's say I'm buying all my widgets and units and pegs and rods and whirly-birds, and it's all coming from like Indonesia or something. If all of those people, plants, and producers and providers moved to the United States of America, there is no universe that exists that those units and things are going to be cheaper than they were from Indonesia, making it more cost beneficial for me. I guarantee you I can buy a pack of 1,000 pencils from Indonesia for less than I could possibly have that same pack of pencils produced and manufactured in America for, and bought them. That's the level that we're at right here. That's why blanket tariffs don't make any sense, especially when your stated objective is so everything gets brought back to America. America has 4% unemployment. 4%. You think somehow we're going to get everything made in America with just 4% unemployment? Let's employ that 4%. So if we have 340 million people, 4% of that's 12 million. I'm doing quick math. So let's say it's 12 million people. If we brought manufacturing of everything into America, especially let's just say everything important, everything that we like need to survive, okay? That's not enough people. It's not enough. And not only is it not enough, but we're kicking out all the workers. Are just like, go talk to a farmer. Farmers can't get. I literally saw on Facebook the other day, no joke, a local, semi-local farm. They were literally having come, it was a berry. They were picking berries, but basically hey, come have fun and pick berries for us. It's a fun family activity. Never did that before. You know why? Because they had a workforce that did it for them. That workforce are probably immigrants who weren't here, let's say, with a green card or authorization to work, and they were getting paid a few bucks under the table, and they were happy. And guess what? That business was happy. I mean, it's kind of a fact of life. You need, in some cases, you either need cheap labor, or you need a mechanism to eliminate that need for cheap labor. That's essentially it. Farmers have been subsidized so long, and everything else is just, we can't make farming economically viable in a lot of situations. At least of all, if you have to pay everyone who works for you a living, or not even a living wage, because let's be honest, like in America, a living wage is kind of a bad word. How dare somebody at McDonald's make $15 an hour? It doesn't make sense. You're trading your life to somebody else to make that somebody else more money than they're paying you. Businesses don't work if you're, I mean, this is like civic economics 101, everything else. Anyway, long story short, tariffs aren't a great idea. I know I went into kind of a tangent on that one, but it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And, we can go into like a lot of their lives. This is a video I'd queued up, but honestly, I don't even want to get into it. Long story short, they're not going to release the Epstein files because, yeah, we're just talking about tariffs. How do we start on? Hey, I get it. I'm bouncing around. I had no structure today. Okay. I didn't build out a list of what I wanted to do. I put tabs in a row. Okay. And we're talking with my tabs in a row. Okay. That's what we're doing right now. Anyway. Long story short, none of it makes sense when you try to piece it together as like a cohesive plan, because there was no plan. There's a couple people throwing rocks at a glass house and hoping that it doesn't shatter. Spoiler alert. It's shattering.